Nick Kedzierski lives in Chemnitz, the city which has come to symbolise the rise of the far right in eastern Germany. The demonstrations took place a year ago. Now people in Chemnitz and across the German state of Saxony are going to the polls to elect a new state parliament.
I still haven't decided who to vote for in the parliamentary elections.
It may be a state election, but it's attracting interest across Germany. The right-wing populist AfD party hopes to come out the big winner. Saxony must decide which direction it plans to take, and so does Nick Kedzierski. Nick has been doing martial arts since he was 8 years old. He's specialised in MMA, or mixed martial arts.
Martial arts has probably contributed greatly to my self-image. It's given me a lot of self-confidence in dicey situations where you're inclined to panic or the adrenaline starts pumping. That doesn't happen so much now because I just know the situation better.
Nick Kedzierski is 28 years old. 5 years ago, he opened his own martial arts studio. He knows the German MMA scene well, and he says it's closely connected to the neo-Nazi scene, especially in eastern Germany.
The worst case I've experienced was at a competition in Zwickau, where people always booed the foreigners. During the finals, the crowds chanted "Hu Nan Ra," short for the right-wing group Hooligans, Nazis, Racists.
This video is an ad for the well-known right-wing MMA event Kampf der Nibelungen, or Fight of the Nibelungs. It's an annual meeting for right-wing extremists in Saxony, disguised as a sporting event. Nick and his friend David know all about Fight of the Nibelungs, which right-wing parties use to attract new voters.
The trouble is, it's a recognised and consciously public right-wing event. They're not stupid. They promote it like a normal MMA fight. But what doesn't belong to the sport is the showing of symbols, etc.
They hang up flags, which really belong to the right-wing scene. And the problem is, they mix their politics with the martial arts. Politicians make appearances and try to manipulate people.
You hear that politicians come and make speeches, fishing for votes.
Nick was born in Chemnitz and has spent most of his life here. He's encountered Nazis outside the martial arts scene too. Even in school, he had to be careful who he made friends with.
In my youth, I naturally had a bit of contact with them at school too. You had to decide on your attitude towards them. One of them was really integrated into the neo-Nazi scene, so my attitude towards him was clear.
While he could never entirely avoid contact with neo-Nazis in his youth, he did try to stay away from them. He takes us to the place where a German of Cuban descent was stabbed a year ago.
This is the memorial for Daniel H., who was murdered here on August 26, 2018.
His death made headlines across Germany. So did the demonstrations afterwards around the Karl Marx monument, one of the city's landmarks. Chemnitz in 2018. Just the suspicion that an asylum seeker killed Daniel H. was enough for Saxony's far-right scene to take to the streets. Björn Höcke and other politicians from the AfD marched side by side with neo-Nazis. They chanted Nazi slogans and did Hitler salutes and attacked politicians and foreign-looking passers-by. The police were outnumbered and overwhelmed. Nick Kedzierski says the demonstrations changed his city. Since then, it's become more polarised. The different political camps are more opposed than ever.
The tone in Chemnitz has become more aggressive. It's divided groups of friends, even my own family a bit.
For instance, Nick and his grandparents often don't see eye to eye.
Hallo, grüße dich.
Today, they've come downtown to have a visit with him.
Wie geht's? Ja, doch, Hammer. Jawohl.
They knew Chemnitz when it was still part of communist East Germany. Much has changed since then, and they don't feel safe here anymore.
Chemnitz 2018.
I can't go out anymore at night. I don't dare go into the city. That's dumb. It wasn't like that before. Don't beat around the bush. It's simple. Everyone says it's the asylum seeker.
If we had more law enforcement and police, the feeling would be better.
The police are getting huge reinforcements.
I have something against people who've committed crimes, having to be kept here to comply with some international legal practice, or when it's not possible to deport them. Those are the ones who are a burden to us.
There's no problem with foreigners. I grew up in a system, in a world that's totally globalized and that only functions through globalization. People say, throw out all the foreigners, but our country couldn't survive without them. So for me, it's not a question of with or without foreigners. Things can only function if we work together.
Nick really likes to talk with his grandparents, especially about politics. But he finds they're sometimes intolerant, though he'd never say that to their faces. And in front of the camera, they're all a bit reticent.
What do you think about the political direction changing, the AfD getting more powerful, and giving the far right a boost?
But that also means that the people on the left will also get more organized, and that would likely provoke more riots.
After the election?
If the AfD comes in first, protests will increase. Not only will people protest more, they're unlikely to do it peacefully, which will lead to rioting. I'm pretty sure of that.
Nick and his friends enjoy a barbecue. None of them are AfD supporters, and yet none believe Chemnitz has a far-right problem. They say last year's demonstrations were exaggerated by the media. They're more worried about the city's image.
I only learned about what happened from the media. Apparently people in Chemnitz are stabbed for next to no reason. There's a bit of latent fear there. This case has been exploited by all sides.
It was presented in the media as if everyone at the demo was right-wing, but that's not how it was. I said the vast majority were simply concerned.
I found it really shocking that even in America they were reporting on Chemnitz, on what was happening here. People must decide for themselves how much importance to place on it. That's probably why so many people, myself included, are afraid to let our children play alone outdoors, which was once totally normal.
I feel the reporting of what happened here in Chemnitz was exaggerated, that it was all very extreme right-wing. For me, what took place wasn't just an extreme right-wing event. I don't like what's become of it. Chemnitz's image has been damaged. That didn't interest the media at the time, and it doesn't interest anyone now.
Just ahead of the state elections, the parties are making a last-minute attempt to woo the voters. At the Social Democrats stand, Nick talks with candidate Hanke Klieser.
Do you think that Chemnitz really has a problem with racism, or is it somewhat exaggerated? What's your opinion?
I think there's no German city that's free of racism. I believe that we have a big problem with how we deal with racism. There are cities, for instance, Rostock in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which had problems with it for a very long time, and also made negative headlines. But they tackled it head-on. I get the feeling that in Chemnitz, people avoid the topic because it's uncomfortable. They're afraid it will harm them just to name it. But this silence only makes things worse.
That silence is expected to benefit one party the most, the AfD. Saxony is the right-wing populist stronghold, so they've also put up a stand downtown. The AfD candidate here tells Nick it's the foreigners, not the neo-Nazis, who are the problem.
Hello. I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick. I'm Stefan. I'm running for parliament.
I come from Chemnitz, was born and raised here. What three main statements does the AfD have for Chemnitz?
The biggest problem here in the city is with immigration. That's a given. You hear it from every citizen. They're also unsettled because we're simply not used to that. From East German times, yes, historically, but...
But we had Vietnamese, Cubans, etc. before.
Right, I know, and that was good. But at the time, they were, in principle, people who came here for professional training. And then they went back home and took those skills with them. We have to look after our own people first, those who've worked and paid taxes here for years.
During their discussion, the AfD stand is surrounded by demonstrators carrying brightly coloured umbrellas. It's a protest action to show that Chemnitz is a colourful and diverse place. But the AfD members don't take the protest seriously. The atmosphere is still quite relaxed, yet the incident shows Chemnitz is divided.
Thanks for the talk. There were some good arguments made, but as I said, a few opinions that just don't fit with my worldview.
Nick Kedzierski won't vote for the AfD, that much is clear. But he's afraid that the right-wing populists could triumph. He longs for a Chemnitz that's governed by tolerance and respect, the way opponents treat one another in martial arts.